All right, hey guys, welcome back to the Melanin Margin. I'm your host, Quaviondre Williams.
And I'm Daquon Wilson.
And this is a talk show dedicated to bringing the marginalized to the spotlight and uplift the Black voices that will no longer stay silent. But before we get into this week's race conversation, I wanted to touch on something that I said in the previous episode when I brought up the term blindsided. You know, it's crazy, Daquon, how much of that ableist dialect has become so ingrained in our lexicon that we don't even realize how offensive some of the stuff that we've been saying are. You know, like phrases like, did I stutter? And are you blind? And are you deaf? Like, it's always been used as a way to demean something or to see something as less than. So it's crazy how we're constantly trying to understand how much oppressive language exists in just our everyday conversation. I mean, this is the reason why I laughed last episode, because I was like, dang, this shit is everywhere. Like, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it's something very real. Like, it wasn't until recently, in the past couple of years that I really started thinking about the way I use certain words and the way our phrases has that impact on people. Nobody could use the N-word around me if you are not Black. Yet there have been times when I've said something that has been kind of ableist or rooted in ableism.
Yeah.
And, I never had that reflection until, these past couple of years of, working on myself and providing growth.
Yeah, I think it's just crazy how these they have become so deeply rooted in our culture that we don't even realize how damaging it can be to some people who actually are a part of that situation. So it's crazy to me how it's just so ingrained in that. I thought that was really interesting because when we were talking last episode, I was like, damn, like this shit is really everywhere. Like, what is going on? So anyway, let's go ahead and get into this week's episode, the effects of COVID-19. So Daquon, this is an episode right here. Let me ask you, how has COVID-19 affected you personally? I know it's a loaded question.
It is. It's one of those questions that's like, I sit here and I think a year ago is when all of this got real for me. Like literally it was, March 13th a year ago when my school sent out an email being like, hey, y'all people on spring break, if y'all are home, stay home. If you have to come back, y'all gotta leave because we are closing down, residents learning, everybody has to go home. I remember just being on spring break with my friends and being like, wow, like we're getting evicted. Like I was at an apartment, so I was off campus, but it was still very real because I was like, yo, if residents' life is closing down and places on campus are closing down, I just lost my job. How am I going to pay for my rent? How am I going to survive? And it was one of those moments where it just hit me. And nothing was known back then. Everybody was just like, we just got to take things one day at a time. We don't have all the information. We'll get it to you as soon. But being mid spring break, partying with friends, and then getting hit with that, we were literally like, look, we got to take a moment, have our breakdowns or whatever, get through this message, this news, and then just go back, still be safe, but enjoy ourselves for the last time, because there have been people who have not seen in forever, forever. And I think in general, COVID-19 and quarantine has just been such a wreck onto my mental health and just plans in general. I think it wasn't until going into quarantine and being isolated that I had to really think about what's going on inside and actually deal with the voices that are in my head and how they affect me. So there was definitely some really bad times, especially that first half of the semester where everything was just we were trying to get adjusted to online learning and everything. That was rough, as well as just so much going on in the world and having to deal with everything, but also not being connected with people to talk it out and be able to have that space where we can be like, hey, the world is shitty, but we're here together because everything's on Zoom, everything is so far apart, as well as just like realizing how burnt out I was with school and just like, it took an entire pandemic for me to just like finally sit down and be like, I'm gonna stop. I'm gonna take a break. Like I'm gonna take some time for myself. Um, so I think that COVID-19 has provided a lot of deep down moments and affected me in so many different ways. But it also provided me that time to like reflect and gather my thoughts and like really be in tune with who I am as a person.
Absolutely. I think that honestly, everybody's experience in this pandemic has been the panoramic, all of these, the
The Panda
pandemonium, whatever
Express.
you want to call it. Like it has all been a crazy journey. I mean, when it first hit, we were on spring break too, and me and my big brother were like on just going on a trip, whatever, just down to North Carolina, and we were like, ooh, everybody like they had closed. I went to Midlands Tech and USC had closed down. They said they were going to do like an extra week or so of spring break. And we were on spring break. We were like, damn, like we wish we had another couple of days or whatever. Like, we hope we get another week or so.
Right.
Probably shouldn't hope that at the time because they were like, we're going to give you extra week. And we were like, yes, baby, we're going to get the extra week of spring break. Like we were so excited. And then they said, we're going to have another week. And we were like, okay, yes, I'm still living for this a little bit. And they were like, so y'all not coming back? I said, what? Oh, I'm sorry? They're like, yeah, no, baby, you can't come back to the building anymore. So we're going to start doing Zoom. We're going to do Zoom, which I didn't know anything about when I first got into it. Thankfully, it's a very easy thing to use.
Mm-hmm.
But the craziest part, I think, was realizing that I was not going to graduate. Because my graduation was during the pandemic. So, and I know there's many people out there who were seniors and college graduates and realizing that you could not walk across the stage. Like, yes, I still got my diploma, and yes, I still got my degree, and yes, I still technically graduated, but I didn't walk across the stage at all. And they still didn't let us walk across the stage even after all that time because they had postponed it until December. And they did let us do it, but it was like a virtual thing that was really just like video. It was just really not, it wasn't it. And then we didn't even get to do like a Zoom kind of graduation. So my mom was pissed. My mom was furious because she was like, not my college graduated child, not what? So it was very much so that, and I have to say, honestly, Daquon, I fully agree with what you were saying about that kind of introspection because it didn't get real for me until they shut shit down.
Mm-hmm.
Like when they said shit was like because thankfully I was on the luckier of the few where I had an essential job. I work at the Home Depot. So my job is essential business. So I remember having to get a form from my job that says, hey, this person can be out at this time because against the code or whatever, because they're working. So I remember the very first time I went to work during the pandemic when they had to shut stuff down,
Mm-hmm.
and driving on the roads in the morning, and they were literally barren almost. Nobody's walking outside, usually around 8 o'clock, whatever, people are like bustling around the road getting to work, but it was like literally barren, Daquon. Like nobody was outside. I was like, oh my God. I was like, Mom. She's like, yeah, bitch. I'm like, oh my God, this is real. Like this is really happening. Like when I was at my job and I was like, oh my God, like we have to really shift so much of what we had to do, the social distancing, the getting the PPE, the personal protection equipment, all that stuff. Like it was such a big shift. And I think that what I really hate about this pandemic is that so many people are getting on, like so many people are dogging on people who haven't like learned something new or used their time. Have you heard a lot of that too?
So
people
much.
Are like, if you don't come out the pandemic with a skill, what are you doing? I'm kind of like, first of all, this is a full ass global pandemic. This is trauma. Right. This is literally trauma for a lot of people. It's a unified trauma that we're all experiencing. So everybody reacts to trauma different ways. Not everybody can just pop off and be like, oh yes, I'm gonna watch I'm gonna learn a whole new language. Or I'm gonna do this and the fourth. The fact that you are able to just survive and just go and live, that is enough. And I think that there were so many people that I was seeing, like, and it made you feel bad kind of when you were like, well, I'm not doing anything because, you're just kind of trying to adjust to the new normal.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to know, like, what did you think about that? When people are like trying to judge people who are not doing anything, like who weren't like, actively learning a skill or going to do this or do that or whatever.
I think it's crazy. Like, I feel like y'all are forgetting that we're literally in a global panoramic. Like, this Panera Bread is not over. This Panera Bread is serious. But like actual serious. Like, this is a time where so much is happening. Like, we have to think. At this point that we're recording this, we've had millions, tens to 20s of millions of cases in the US alone. We've had over 500,000 people die from the virus. And it's one of those things that, like, so many people know somebody that's been, either sick or died or, have some proximity to COVID-19. And just like creating this like productivity mindset, like, y'all are really just trying to perpetuate capitalism in the middle of a pandemic. Like, what are y'all doing? This is the time when we need to be able to look at human beings as human beings instead of like machines for productivity, and just like make sure that we are checking in with people as human beings. Like, I don't care whether you created a business during the pandemic or not. Are you good? Do you have space where you can feel like you can deal with whatever you're going through emotionally, mentally, physically, spiritually, whatever your need, you have those met? Because this is a time for survival for so many people. They don't have time for all that extra stuff.
I think I fully agree. That shit was pissing me off so much. And the craziest part, it's usually celebrities that are doing that are not groundwork in the actual, yeah, you're dealing with it too, but not on the same scale.
Right.
And it just really frustrated me that everybody's solution to the pandemic or financial struggles is like, start a business, own your own. It's like, bitch, not everybody's supposed to have a business. Not everybody has that kind of business mind. And it really frustrated me that so many people were acting like this was the only solution that you could do. The only way that you could get this done, the only way you could do things, if you don't have a business, you're not really doing nothing. It's kind of like, bitch, no, that's not how this works.
Money.
Business takes risks. It takes time. And if you're not really passionate about a business, bang, and you're just doing it just to get some money, that's not going to actually get anything happening, because there are going to be times your business is not going to do well. And you're going to have the passion to back that up. So if you just started a business just to make some money, that's not going to help anything. That's not going to do anything. That's only going to cause more bills for you to, like, Daquon. And it will always be like, own your own, start your own, do your own. It's kind of like, bitch, how about, are you taking care of your mental health? Exactly. Are you trying to keep yourself sane? Are you trying to make sure that you're keeping your family safe? Like, are you wearing your mask? Are you doing your thing? Like, these are things that we need to be thinking about instead of trying to shame people into taking a humongous financial risk that they may or may not want to do.
Right. Because we have to realize, for so many people, they've been living paycheck to paycheck before the pandemic. And then the pandemic hit, and a lot of people lost their jobs. A lot of people who were living paycheck to paycheck was like, I can't go to work anymore. Or even if they do qualify as an essential worker, there's so many people that are either immunocompromised, live with people who are immunocompromised, got to take care of like older relatives, grandparents, whatever, and they can't afford the risk of working through a pandemic. And it's like, if you are dealing with all of that, you don't have the money to take those risks to make a business, to try to make a profit. Because at the end of the day, like, so many people lost their jobs. They don't have the disposable income to invest in your business. So like, sales are going down for even as well-established companies, let alone you trying to start your small business now, because we have a government that, you really got to fight to just get money out of them to make sure that people can live and survive and have something when so many people lost everything that they had.
And going on to that, I think that it really breaks my heart that as Americans and as just a society, people weren't really understanding just how much it's affected so many people, because specifically talking about evictions and rent payments and car payments and insurance payments and all these things. And I'm like, where was the compassion? Where was the fact that we all are aware this is a global pandemic? Why are we still expected to pay rent right now? Why are we still expected to pay a mortgage right now? Why are we still expected to pay a car payment or car insurance right now? I'm not saying that it should have been frozen forever, but bitch, y'all can give us a month? Like a month, Daquon.
Right. It's one of those things that, like, I've heard this argument so many times of like, well, landlords have to pay, their bills. And I'm like, that's part of the problem is we're so focused on just like pay the bills and not, people are dying. People don't have jobs to pay the bills. This is something that's happening across the country. And if we were able to make sure that, people had the funds to where they can stay home and not have to go out and try to work and try to do everything, that people were actually able to stay home, have an actual lockdown, not like one of those, everywhere was basically open, but like some places was like, we're going to have limited hours or just drive through or whatever. If we were able to actually stay in place, this pandemic could have had a lot more control and a lot more things happening. And then I think also people fail to realize how these certain ideas, affect our communities differently. Like, for example, thinking about mortgages versus rent, like um, a lot of mortgage payments were suspended, but rent payments not as much. Or, there were places that put moratoriums on these type of things. But if you're putting more, moratoriums and stuff like that for mortgage payment and not rent payments, then you have to realize the racial effect that has, and how most Black people do not own their own homes. They rent a lot of different places, and that disproportionately affects Black people because we're already the people who are more likely to live in poverty, more likely to live paycheck to paycheck, to be one paycheck away from poverty.
I fully agree. I think specifically for me, this pandemic hits especially hard because in this time, me, my mom, and my sister were living in this apartment complex. And right during the pandemic, and once again, things affect things, people, the checks aren't the same, stuff like that, whatever. So everybody was saying, like the rent people were saying, like, yeah, you don't have to pay rent, but you're gonna have to pay this next month. It wasn't a freeze or a, hey, y'all are good for this month, we'll get y'all need to get us next month, or we're like giving us a time frame. No, they were like, no, we'll defer it, but you're gonna have to pay it. And I was like, we're gonna have to pay. Well, and my whole thing was like, if we didn't have the money then, like, you know what I mean? Like, if we didn't have that money then, what makes you think we're gonna have it that time? And so it was really crazy to me because I was like, what if we didn't have anyone? Like, what if, because I mean, thankfully, my mom still had her job. Thankfully, things still kind of worked out for us. But my whole thing was like, what about people who didn't? What about people who had to defer their rent for like a month or 2 months or whatever, and now they got a almost 2 stacks of a 2-stack rent payment due, and they don't have a job. You see what I'm saying? Like, they go in, and then yes, they freeze evictions, quote unquote. They did freeze the evictions, but they said that the moment that it was opened up again, they were going to be evicted. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, that was the crazy part. And then the kicker, Daquon, the kicker was right at the renewal point where, like, when the most people renew their leases or whatever, they raised the rent. And I was like, so you're telling me that not only are you not going to try to work with us, or not only are you not going to try to give us some kind of leeway, but you're going to also raise the rent so that we can't recertify our lease agreement. So of course we had to move because the fee went up. The rent went up at least about $50, $70, which to some people may not be a lot, but to somebody who's just like people trying to just get by and doing what they're doing, the rent is already high. That's a big jump.
Right.
And it was crazy to me because I'm kind of like, even when I called my insurance people for my car at the time, I was like, hey, so what about this insurance? Like, what can we do? They were kind of like, well, yeah, we can defer the payment to next month, but you're going to have to pay both that payment and the other payment on the same day. I'm like, bitch, if I didn't have the fucking money, And that's what really pissed me off, Daquon, because I heard that some people were like, their what is it called? Their insurance people were like, y'all got 1 month good. Whenever you choose to use that is whenever you use it. But you got 1 month where you don't have to pay anything and you'll be insured and you'll be fine. You don't have to pay us. And I was like, I mean, yeah, it wasn't as good as it could have been, but at least it was one. At least. And I was like, y'all, your rent people, the mortgage people, y'all couldn't give people like, all right, y'all, y'all get 1 month free pass. And after that, we're gonna have to defer or whatever it has to be. But I'm like, y'all didn't have any kind of compassion whatsoever. Like, not a drop.
Because that's just how our society has been built. Like, we have been made on American exceptionalism as well as American individualism. Always just like, oh, if something goes wrong, pull yourself up by your bootstraps and you can achieve anything you want. In reality, there are so many different barriers. Like, we are so many people, especially people who are at the higher echelons of society, see themselves as like, I only need to rely on myself. I got here by me, therefore everybody else can do it. And we don't need to have things like actual livable minimum wage or universal basic income or healthcare that actually positively affects people or anything like that. And it's taken in, like, the pandemic is only illuminating all of these different holes that are in our society. This pandemic, like, while a public health crisis is not necessarily a political moment, we're seeing how many political issues we're seeing during this political moment. You know, the ways in which we can't get a higher minimum wage. Even though if we, took the minimum wage from when it was actually created and adjusted it for inflation, it would be like 20 something dollars, but we can't get $15. And it's one of those things that we realize, like, so many people are focused about themselves. So many people are not focused on like people as humans. They're just like money. And it's capitalism. And this is why so many people say capitalism is the root of a whole bunch of evil, because we're so focused on how we can just like try to boost the economy and try to like do things just for money and capital purposes instead of like having a moral compass.
Absolutely. And I really feel like, honestly, Daquan, it is so frustrating, especially with the anti-maskers versus the maskers. It is extremely frustrating to me that mask wearing has not become a public state of health emergency. Instead, it has become a political statement. That has literally pissed me off so much, because regardless of your political leanings, this is about health. This is about a virus, a disease that literally kills people. And now it seems as though the only people not wearing masks are usually Donald Trump supporters or Republicans, and Democrats are the ones wearing masks. And I'm kind of like, where the fuck did we have this separation that says, oh yeah, this shit ain't real because of Donald Trump says it's not real. And that's what really pissed me off. It's kind of like, I do not like that motherfucker under no circumstances. But I will say that if he handled this differently, we could have been in an entirely different position at this point in time. If he said, if you want to support me and be a racist asshole, that is fine. But you're going to have to put your motherfucking mask on when you come to my rally. Imagine the lives that could have been saved, Daquon. Just imagine for a moment.
Yeah, it's one of those things that the problem with masks are they protect other people more than they protect you. And that's like, so many people are just, like I said before, so individualistic. They're like,
Yes.
this is causing me a mild inconvenience.
Yeah.
It's not helping me as much it is helping other people or whatever, so I'm not going to do it because it's not helping me that much and it's causing me some mild inconvenience. And it's like, if you feel that wearing a mask is oppression, you ain't felt. The
Say that
privilege
again
is
for me,
real.
Daquon. Say it for me one more time, Daquon. You got to lay that for the people in the back.
If you feel like wearing a mask is oppression, the privilege is real. You haven't felt real oppression ever in a day in your life.
And that's the crazy part, Daquon. And I have to say this. In the beginning of the pandemic, I was not a mask wearer. I was like, this shit ain't real. Like, it's going to be like Ebola. I thought it was going to be just like Ebola. I thought that's what's going to happen because like Ebola was a thing, but it wasn't really a big thing like that. It kind of got controlled. So I was like, you know what? It's not really that fucking important. Like, I'm not going to wear the mask. Like, it's whatever. Like, I'll be fine. You know, it's cool. Month 2 comes in when we're like shutting shit down and stuff is not able to do stuff. And they're like, and I was like, when everybody, well, you got to wear a mask. I'm kind of like, why to wear a mask? It's not going to stop. It's not going to protect you from Corona. And I Googled what masks do or what they, you know, are supposed to be able to, you know, be. And they were like, the mask protects other people from you. And if all of us wear, we protect each other. And I was like, oh, it clicked then. So I was like, oh yeah, let me put my fucking mask on. I don't fucking like it, but let me put it on and just get it out of the way and just do what I gotta do. And I realized that then, this is what I say, I give leniency for the first 2, maybe 3 months, because it was definitely a big adjustment to make. We are a year in.
What are you doing?
We are a year in, Daquon.
A whole year, a whole 365 days.
And you are still resisting wearing that fucking mask, knowing now that this is all the way real. Like I said, and that's why I say I'm not sitting there acting like I was angel or whatever the case to be. Like I said, in the beginning, no, I didn't believe in the mask either. In the beginning of that first month or so, I was like, no, this ain't real. Then shit started to hit the fan, and the CDC was like, motherfucker, listen. And I was like, oh, this is for real. Let me put this shit on. I don't like it, but you adjust.
Right.
And like I mean, I want to ask you, Daquon, were you always a mask wearer, or were you like, or was it something you just fell into? It was good from the beginning.
I fall into the camp to where like it wasn't that I was anti-mask. It was just like I didn't have the resources. Like I was in my apartment and I was like, we gotta get masks. Like I was I was honestly paranoid to go out to get a mask because I was like, I don't have a mask. What if I catch corona trying to buy a mask? Or like again, like that was back when I was worried so hard about like trying to make sure I could pay my rent, just keep everything going, that I was like, you know, mask prices are going up and up and up because so many people are buying them. And I was just like, I just gotta stay home. Like I literally asked my parents, I was like, hey, like not doing really well financially. Could I get money to like order food so I could just have things delivered? And again, like it wasn't like I was anti-mask. Like I was like, if it's going to work, it's going to work. But I
and that's
tried what I had.
And I want to clarify, like, I mean to cut you off. I want to clarify real quick. I wasn't an anti-masker so much as I was a person who didn't understand what was going on fully. So like in that situation with me, like I said, it was one of those things. It was kind of like there were so many conflicting conversations about what masks really do and what they can do, because people were like, the masks work. Oh, when you have to have this kind of mask, you have to have this kind of mask, or whatever. So it was so much back and forth because the CDC was fighting with President Trump at the time and all that stuff. So there was a lot of going on there was a lot of conflicting opinions about mask wearing. So I thought, it don't really matter. It's fine, whatever. So I want to clarify that real quick. I was like, no, I wouldn't an anti-masker, but I was a person who didn't understand what masks did. So once the conversation slowly filtered to like this, any mask that you wear, as long as it has the little filter in, helps stop the spread. And that's when I was like, okay, this shit is for real. But I cut you off. What you about to say, Daquon?
Oh, I was just gonna say, like, it was one of those things that, like, I would say from the beginning, I was like, okay, it kind of makes sense. Like, if corona is spread by like coughing on people or just like particles, like your mouth is covered. Like, we do things like this already. Like, it's proper to like cover your nose when you sneeze or stuff like that. So, like, for me, wearing a mask wasn't necessarily a big deal, but I do see like reason to give people leniency, especially at the very beginning, because it was so many different conflicting views and so much going out like, oh, you need an N95 or no, you just need this type of mask, this, or so many different things. And then there was a time when like, oh, don't buy masks, do not buy masks.
Yeah, because we got to give them to the people who are the nurses and stuff.
Right,
Yeah.
like we ran out of PPE for healthcare workers. So like yeah, for the first like couple weeks, it was like do what you need to do to get by. Like if you don't have a mask, like still try to be safe. Don't go coughing in people's faces. If you feel sick, stay home. But like I remember just being like, oh, all I have is a red bandana. And I was like, I'm not trying to walk around my very white, predominantly white institution area as a Black man
No,
with
no.
a red bandana.
Especially not with everything going on last year. Shit, any year, honestly, at this point.
Yeah, I was like, I can't, But like once I got mask, I went home, came back to campus, and it was like, oh, wear a mask on campus. I was like, cool.
Yeah.
Got my mask on all the time.
Yeah, my job for the first couple, like I said, for the first month or so, were redirecting all the masks that came in from shipping to the hospitals. Like they were donating it. So we didn't have any kind of mask at first. And then they started to actually bring some back in for us to wear in the job, and they actually started giving us mask boxes up for us at home or whatever. So I thought that was a pretty cool thing too, because they gave that. I personally thankful I got that job that was like we give you masks so that you're good, so that you come in with the mask. They was requesting that every employee had to come into the building with a mask. You couldn't enter the building without a mask on. So and because there was so much shortage going on, they actually gave us masks to take home. So we actually had like the boxes free of charge. And I was like, cop off, PPE. But I wanted to ask your opinion because we are currently a year in Corona. And it's no longer COVID-19, it's COVID-19-20. So in 2021, I mean, it's just a 2019, this is a 3-year fucking disease. But it was first seen in 2019 and it boiled over in 2020, and now we're in 2021. So I wanted to ask you, especially with everything going on, how do you feel personally about bars and clubs and theaters and certain things being open to the public?
We don't need to. Like, I think it's one of those things that like, sure, I would love to like go out to a bar or a club with friends and like have fun, but I've lived my life without it. Like it's been perfectly fine. I'm not saying that because like also like I do recognize, people have to work at those places.
Yeah.
And our government does not provide people the structures to not to deal with those closures. But I think it's one of those things that like, yes, we are so much time in deep with this pandemic that's happening. And a lot of it has just been like, we don't want to adjust our lives to fit the current conditions. And it's one of those things that like, yeah, sure, bars can stay open, but like we need to make sure that we are doing our due diligence to make sure we're not creating super spreader environments. Bars can be open to where like the bars make food and you can have to go things or something like that. Or, having like, even like people were talking about concerts and having like pods where you have like socially distant areas for people who are in a pod together to like hang out and just like have fun in their little small area away from other people. So I think it's one of those things that like in a perfect world we could just like close everything down, like have everybody like stay at home and we could flatten the curve like quickly. But we don't live in a perfect society. So just like being able to make sure that we are taking the precautions needed and we're not taking advantage of things opening back up as treating it like business as usual.
Yeah, I think it's crazy because I have a mixed feelings about the bars and stuff like that, because like you said before, on one hand, you fully understand that there are people who are losing their deeds and their, businesses because this is their market. Like they are bar owners, they are whatever owners, whatever the case may be. And like you said before, I feel like that's not their fault. I feel like that's the fault of the government for not supplying certain jobs with the tools to make sure that they actually can shut down and actually be all right. Or like we said earlier, freezing Ds and freezing payments and freezing things so that people will still be able to come back to it and also be able to pay their bills. Like there should have been consistent payments. We'll get to the stimulus in a minute, but we're gonna get to that conversation in just a second. But like I said, it's conflicting feelings for me because on the one hand, I'm like, absolutely not. Like, I'm like, unfortunately, I don't believe in one split second that you can social distance in a bar because people are getting drunk, people want to get laid, people want to have sex, people want to make friends, and people are getting drunk. So inhibitions go down. Fears go down when you drink. You know what I'm saying? So the worries that you have, like I don't want to catch corona, will start not looking like a worry after 2 Long Island iced teas. You know what I'm saying? So like, you know, like so I think that for me personally, I'm like no, and I think that and the way that I kind of had to look at it was like, you know, because once I was thinking I want to go to the movies, I miss really going to the movies because that was my thing, and I was like, well, I can't in good faith say that people shouldn't be able to go to the bar if I go to the movies.
Right.
Because and that's the same thing. It's a pleasure. It's not a requirement. It's not something I have to do. Clubs, absolutely not. You know what I'm saying? But like you said before, it's that conflicting feeling of like, you understand why people want it back open. Number one, because we are social animals. We are social beings. So being around people helps us stay mentally sound. People do not do well isolated. That's not, it's against the fiber of our creation as human beings. But you know, on the other hand, it's like we're in a global pandemic, and if people fucking follow rules, we'd be out of the shit. Like, do you know that like in Australia, I think, like Corona's not even they fucking at the parties, they good. They're good because they're holding imports. Like if anybody comes to Australia, they have to quarantine for 14 days. They have to get tested for coronavirus before they can actually enter the city or enter Australia. As far as I know right now. Mm-hmm. But you know, please correct me if I'm wrong. But I'm just saying, like, there are certain countries and places that have completely got the pandemic under control, and America's still the one that's like, no. And it's just, and like I said, it's frustrating because, like I said, I understand wanting to keep the bars open, and I feel like, you know, maybe there should be a kind of, you can go to the bar in your car, and you can have maybe one drink delivered to you, maybe, or 2 drinks, but you have to show that you're not gonna be the one driving or whatever, you know, stuff like that, like giving proof, like who's driving, who's whatever, like, you know, working around it. Like there's these drive-in drag shows that we see where people are driving in to kind of support the dolls. So, I mean, I get there are ways to make it work, but I think that in certain instances, especially like bars, I can understand. Clubs, the fuck not. Absolutely the fuck not.
Impossible.
A club, everybody trying to fuck somebody. Like, let's just, I mean,
100%.
And like I said, movie theaters maybe, but like I said, movie theaters and bars, I can understand a little bit better. But even still, like I said before, how do we navigate that? You know, just wearing a mask, that's gonna be enough. When people gonna be putting their mask on to eat popcorn, and people gonna be putting their mask to eat food. Can they only stay in their cars? So I think that this could have been approached in a different way. That could have also, like, people can still go to the bar, but you have to stay in your car, or you have to you have to have a certain limit. You have to have proof of who's driving, because if you have more than a 2-drink minimum, you have to have a whatever the fuck. You know what I'm saying? Like something like that in place. But I think that because nobody had any kind of preparation for this, and nobody really knew, like there was no plans in place, I think that people kind of just were going it by ear and were like, yeah, we can do a 10% capacity, a 50% capacity. But in reality, like you said before, are creating super spreader environments.
Right.
Yeah. So I think that's how I personally feel about that. Like I feel that bars and clubs like that, like there's just clubs, absolutely not, but bars and movie theaters, there's a way to do it that we just haven't done. And I think that right now we really need to understand that as far as this pandemic goes, we are still not out of it yet. So we need to stop playing around like this shit is gone.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing. I think everybody is just like trying to hold on to like normalcy. Like we just want to get back to being normal. But you know, that kind of brings a question I kind of want to ask you is like, do you think we'll ever be normal? Do you ever think that like we'll go back to like just being the same exact way we were pre-panoramic?
Every time I can't, every time, but no, absolutely not. And I don't think we should. I honestly think that this pandemic was I think that this pandemic really made us take a really harsh look at how we approach a people and like social distancing and stuff like that. Like I feel like this stuff, like in Japan or in Asian countries or whatever, like they've been with the mask culture. Because it was just respectful. Like if you were sick or you weren't feeling well, you put a mask on to keep yourself from spreading your germs to somebody else. So I really hope that when we come out of this pandemic, we enter into a new normal. Like I remember before pandemic, pre-pandemic, people would be like, when you say like, oh, I'm sick or I'm not feeling well, people like, give me a hug anyway, I'm fine. It's kind of like, bitch, I just the fuck said. Like, you know, have you ever had that happen before? People like, oh, you're sick, I don't give a fuck, I'm fine, give me a hug. Like,
right.
What the fuck are you
like,
doing?
oh, you can still come into work.
Yeah. And like people like literally, but pre-pandemic, people like standing right behind you in lines, breathing all down your neck. Baby, I should not be able to feel your breath on my neck right here. Baby, no. So I really hope that we don't, I do want us to be in a new normal. Mm-hmm. Like I do think there will come a time where masks will not be mandatory, but I do think it will still be encouraged. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like I feel like when it comes to like for me, it's hard because like I think that once we get to a point where we have the herd immunity, like everybody says we're gonna get, like once we get to the herd immunity part of the COVID virus, I think honestly, like, you know, I don't know when I'll be comfortable enough to go into a like Food Lion or Dollar General or, you know, a big place of business or whatever without a mask on. Mm. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. I don't know when I'll get to that point. Now, like I said, I'm not saying that this is going to be, we're never going to go back to not wearing masks again, but I do think the mask is going to become a more normal part of our culture now.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that like, we'll never get back to pre-Pendulce. Like, it's not going to happen. But, you know, I think that like you were saying, it's very real that people are going to be paranoid once things do open back up a little bit more. And we're just like, oh, you don't have to wear a mask. But then people are going to be like, what are we going to do for the next pandemic that's going to happen? Like, what if this happens? Like, what if some new strand of coronavirus happens and it takes the world by storm again? Or what if there's some other disease that like we don't know that much about? Because like the thing is like the coronavirus was having research done on it in the past, but yeah, it's like, oh well, like
it's not new. Yeah,
right, it's not new. Like we have a novel strain now, but it's not something that was, you know, popped out of thin air. So like they were doing research on it, but it stopped because it was like, oh well, like this is kind of under control, we don't need to like do too much, so like we're not going to fund these projects as much. But like I don't think that like we could ever get back to the same thing. But hopefully like that could be something that we use as a positive, you know. For example, a lot of people from who have disability have been like really talking about making things more accessible, like especially things like conferences, where it was like, oh well, like we can't make this entire conference virtual, it's too much, the technology's not there. But we see now like we have to do things to make things virtual more accessible.
Adjust. Yeah,
exactly. So it's one of those things that like hopefully there's some positives, hopefully there's ways. Like I have this friend who literally just like can't necessarily walk all the time because they have a problem with their hip, and you know they have times when like they cannot just walk to class because they're in excruciating pain. So like now post pandemic, you know, making things a little bit more accessible so that somebody can join a class from like a Zoom or something like that, instead of just being like, oh, you can't come here, like you can't access anything from here.
Absolutely. I think first, I want to make a point on what you were saying too, because you brought it up. I really feel really bad for people who have disabilities, especially mental disabilities or mental disorders, specifically like OCD, anxiety disorders, people who are afraid of going outside. Like, imagine how much this pandemic has pushed their progress back.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Like, especially those with like cleanliness OCD or germophobia, what it's called. Like, imagine those people right now. You know, are we making mental health more of a thing now that everybody has had some experience with it now, because we all in this collective trauma. You know what I mean? And I really wanted to touch on what you said too about the whole the having pandemic plans. Like, I feel like now that we've experienced this, moving forward, we should definitely make these things more available. Like you said before, I don't think that Zoom should go away or virtual things should go away. I think that if you are not able to come into class for whatever reason, you should be able to virtual in. I think that is amazing. Mm-hmm. Like, I think that is great. I think that Ben should have been a thing. Do you see what I'm saying?
Right.
Like, I feel like if you let's say your car goes you can't whatever, or you don't have a ride, you don't have enough for an Uber, you don't have enough for whatever, you still have the comfort of saying, all right, even though I can't make it into class, I can still virtual in to be a part of it and not miss important instruction.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? Like, even if it is open for that, there should definitely be plans in place. And I really hope that coming out of this pandemic, whenever the fuck we come out of this pterodactyl, I think that we
not a pterodactyl.
it's a silent P, y'all. It's a silent P. But I think that when we come out of this, I really want us to implement these new strategies as to permanent, so that we are all able to participate in certain things that we may not have been able to before. Like you said before, people who are not able to walk or not be able to get to places as well, they have the option to do a virtual. And I think that virtual classes, I just don't understand why the fuck, like, we're in fucking 2020. We can FaceTime at a drop of a fucking dime. So why aren't classes online? Why isn't that a thing? Like, do you see what I'm saying? Like, why isn't there like a choice of, like, you can have this instructor online, the same instructor, and there's going to be people in class, you can still participate in the class even if you're virtually in there. Do you see what I'm saying? So like, I mean, it's crazy that we have all of this technology readily available, and we figured out when we had to, but like, could have had options for people who didn't or couldn't come to school or couldn't do those things. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So going back to how this whole topic relates to us, and like we're talking about the Black community and stuff like that. Now we need to move on to the fact of the vaccine, and especially when it comes to people of color in vaccinations. So, do you mind if I start off first real quick, Daquon?
Yeah, go ahead.
Because I really want to get your response for this. So right here, we know that medical racism is a key factor in why many people of color, specifically Black people, are distrusting of the medical community. Now, in an article written by Callie Crossley, she discusses that the Tuskegee study, which began in 1932, is etched in the psyche of Black Americans. She goes on to say that they know the story of how Black men with syphilis were deliberately only given placebos or aspirin for the virulent disease, so the public health doctors could monitor the resulting blindness and insanity. Now, even current day medical racism is embedded in the negative assumptions of healthcare professionals about the pain level and symptoms of people of color. Apparently, this fact is inescapable even for wealthy African Americans. She goes on to say that tennis superstar Serena Williams almost died in childbirth because she couldn't initially convince medical staff that something was wrong. Now, Crossley also goes on to say that Leigh Ann Webb, a University of Virginia's emergency room physician, led a survey of patients who arrived at the hospital's emergency room to be tested for COVID-19. Webb told CBS News doctors were disproportionately ordering more tests for people who were white, despite the fact that it was the people of color disproportionately affected. Boston City Council President Kim Janey recently told GBH News of the years of the distrust that can't be ignored, saying that we cannot sweep under the rug and think people are just going to roll up their sleeves and take this vaccine, especially with everything going on. So I wanted to get your opinion on that, Daquon. How do you feel about the Black community's resistance towards this vaccine, and do you think it's justified?
I think that the hesitation is justified. I will never say not to get the vaccine because, like, you know, this vaccine has been tested time and time again, and has been tested as well as done its due diligence. Um, but again, that doesn't erase the history that the medical field has in racism. And I think in general, like, it's one of those things that uh 42% of blacks in December was like, I don't intend on getting the vaccine. It
Mm-hmm.
could change now that all that like vaccine rollout has started a little bit more and things are happening, but it is something that is felt within the African American community because of
Yeah.
like the Tuskegee experiment, because of things like doctors not listening to black women when they're saying, hey, I'm in pain. And it's like, no, you have a better pain threshold than that. Like, you can deal with
Yeah.
it. Um, so yeah, I think that it's, you know, I'm not going to say completely justified because, I'm never going to be like, oh no, don't get the vaccine. I'm not going to spread information like that. But I will say it is one of those things that you do need to understand the context, and it's not completely on the black community. A lot of it comes from outside sources not doing its due diligence to respond to the black community. Like the Dr. Raymond Crow was talking, he's the director of the Department of Health and Human Services, and he noted that we are under registering dramatically in minority communities that have been most severely impacted by this virus. So even in people, talking about the distribution of the vaccine, and trying to make reach out processes to explain how the vaccine has been developed, how is it safe, how is it ethical, and break down all of the myths that you hear. Um,
Mm-hmm.
they have been doing that more in white communities than they have black communities, even though black communities are the communities that need to be focused on. So yeah, I think that I remember today, like, I saw somebody walking around with signs being like, don't get the vaccine. It causes infertility or cerebral palsy, or it kills you. This was also a side note. This was also somebody that was like, indoor plumbing causes autism. So like,
Get the fuck.
so like,
Mind you, let's not take that. Let's take that with a grain of salt right there. Let's
right,
not.
like they were doing this right in front of the CDC too, because Emory's right next to the CDC. So I was like, y'all, you really out here. But back to the point. I think that there is a lot of misinformation that comes from the
Yes.
vaccine. So making sure that there are places that are making sure that the vaccine information is being spread ethically, being spread truthfully, honest, and making sure that it's getting to the places that need to be done. But also, like, side note, like, so many people are like, I don't know what's in the vaccine. I need to see all the ingredients. And I'm like, you not seeing all the ingredients of that jungle juice. You don't
Oh,
care about all of the chemicals that are in the vapes that you're smoking.
oh.
So, like, where,
Take that 3 notches down.
right, down to down. Again, hesitation, perfectly valid because history of racism. But let's make sure that we are doing our due diligence of researching.
Yeah, I agree. I do think that it is definitely the feelings, I believe, are justified. The
Mhm.
feelings of fear and hesitation are definitely justified from the history of medical racism that we have seen in our community, when it comes to the medical community. But I think that it's strange because, you know, it's hard because you realize that this is definitely all white supremacy. I mean, it just fucks shit up. Like, and like you said, it's so hard to say because it's kind of like you don't want to say no, don't get the vaccine, but you're also like, I do understand why some people might not get it
Right.
because of that, and it's kind of like, there has been history that has proven that the medical community is not here for us. You know what I'm saying? It's proven that we're not seen as, as relevant or as important as our white counterparts or whatever. So I find it very frustrating that there is not more information being spread about the COVID vaccine in Black circles. specifically on Black television, like talk shows and stuff like that. And they're like really breaking down, bringing in people who are going to really, really break down what this means, what this could do, what are some of the side effects, what could this mean, like really giving us a open dialogue for the vaccine, because I feel like, like I said before, this is something that's completely different. It's not like the flu. It's not the same thing as the other vaccines we've taken before. This is something that's completely been created specifically for this vaccine. It has not gone through years and years of testing and trials or whatever the case may be. So the hesitation is there, but I feel like there should be a conversation between medical professionals. Like if you qualify to take the vaccine, I feel like you should be able to ask all the questions you want to ask.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? I feel like it should be an open dialogue, or at the very least, you should get a pamphlet beforehand that says, this is what is to be expected, these are some of the side effects, and this is what it's going to be doing. You see what I'm saying? Something that's even if you can't talk to them about it all the time, I think that having a pamphlet that really outlays, now I don't know because I don't qualify for the vaccine right now, what they give people who do qualify for it, but I really do hope that there is like an information pamphlet or some kind that says, this is what is to be expected. You might feel a little bit woozy or whatever the case may be, or whatever. So like, I feel like there's definitely that conversation needs to be had. I don't know if it's being had. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that would definitely help kind of quell some of that fear.
Yeah, I agree. I think that we need more conversations on it. And like kind of talking about some of the things that you said, like I think a big hesitation is around like how quickly this vaccine has come.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I also want to like encourage people to like do more research on the development of the vaccine, because like a lot of this research was research that started years ago when people
Oh,
were first discovering about earlier versions of the coronavirus and being able to like pull from that research, as well as just
gotcha.
like the amount of funding that research projects to cure COVID or find a vaccine for COVID has gotten way more funded than some of the other things. And like, it's one of those things that the COVID vaccine has like, 90, 95, something like, depending on which one you do, like Moderna, Pfizer, I think like in the
Yeah.
90s in terms of like their efficacy rates. Yet, something like the flu shot, something that people are fine with all the time, has like 60% or something like that. So this vaccine is
Yeah.
way more effective than some of the things that we trust a little bit more. But I do think like you were getting at a good point of like, we need to make sure that we are communicating that information to Black communities in a way that like it comes from Black communities. Cause like Fauci's
Yes.
cool, Fauci's all right. Like Fauci's our graduation speaker.
Yeah.
Going to be hearing from him in 65 days.
Ooh.
Um, it is like he's a old white man. Man's like 80 something years old, something like that. So making sure that like we have, Black celebrities, like you were saying, Black talk shows, Black press being like, hey, like this is what happening, like leading by example, getting the vaccine, showing people that, hey, like we trust in this vaccine, like we've done the research, we're talking to the experts, we can have Black experts on these things, talking about it to Black communities.
And I really wanted to touch on what you said about the fact that, the years before they've all been like researching this. Now, I was under the impression that they just were aware of the coronavirus, but they weren't working to actively try to find a way to fix it because it wasn't affecting anyone yet. But the fact that you brought it up, that's something I didn't even know. So like imagine had people known that, yes, the vaccine feels like it came, a turnaround was so fast, but it's actually been because of research from years. That's why it's so easy for them to create something to combat it, because they've had these years of research. But like I just said in this conversation, I didn't know that they were working on like vaccines or other countermeasures for the coronavirus before it even became a real big thing.
Mm-hmm.
And imagine if that information was relayed to the Black community and relayed to people of color and let them know, hey, this shit has come out of it wasn't like that. It wasn't magic.
Right.
So I think I want to kind of move the conversation a little bit back towards the financial aspect of it. Stimulus checks.
Woo.
Stimulus checks.
Listen, honestly, a stimulus check could be an episode on its own because there's so much going on under it. But I think it's crazy how like If you look at countries that have relative better control on the coronavirus, they done a lot more public good, stimulus, making sure people have livable wages, making sure that people have some form of income so that they can stay at home, or they have some type of emergency funds and stuff like that. And the fact that, we our government has to fight for $600, $1,200, like what is it going to be? Is absolutely insane. And it's one of those things that, like, I don't understand how people don't see why we need stimulus check. Even if we're thinking about like Republicans and how they are so invested in the economy, like if you think about what a stimulus check does, it makes sure that people have income. When people have income, they can pay their bills, but they can also have money to buy things. They can buy food, they can buy groceries, they can buy all of these different things and stimulate the economy, like like make it make sense. Like, I don't understand how people don't want this thing to happen when A, we need it, and B, it would actually be good for the economy.
Or the fact that I fully agree with what you're saying. The fact that they were really just 3 payments so far. Right now, we have the 3rd payment on the way at the time of this recording. Joe Biden just signed the bill into office, so it's gonna the checks are being deposited sometime next week or week following.
And not everybody got that,
but not everybody got
you off because.
Go ahead, no, go off.
But like, even in these stimulus conversations, like not every American got stimulus checks. Like, for example, if you're a dependent, it doesn't matter if you're an adult. Like, if you are a dependent, you did not get a stimulus check for yourself. Your parents may have gotten a little extra, but you did. Like me as a college student, a whole bunch of other college students did not get stimulus checks because they're like, oh, you're still a dependent, which, that's a whole like twisted thing, because there are people who are claimed on their parents' taxes, but their parents don't necessarily provide them actual dependency. Or even if you think like people in my situation where like I was in an apartment, I had my job, I was paying my own rent.
Yeah.
And like whatever you're giving my parents is not necessarily going to help them pay for my rent, because they're my parents. They also have their own bills. They also have a family, and it's one of those things that like college students need that money too. Where's our check? Run us our money. Like,
I want to ask, do you qualify this time?
I still have to do my research about it. Like, I've read somewhere that it's qualified, but I've heard some things to where like college students qualify, but it's not going to go to their account, is going to go to their parents' account.
Okay.
I just gotta make sure I know what's up.
Yeah, I fully agree. Like, that is just crazy how, like you said before, there's no checks and balances system that says, hey, let's actually see what you're making and what you're doing. Are you really are you really a dependent, or stuff like that, or can you refute, what I'm saying, somebody getting your stimulus check inside of you? I think my thing was, most people's rent, they stimulus check paid for. That was pretty much it. Like, and my thing was, and again, like I said, I have been fortunate enough to be in a position where I kept working. Thankfully, that, like I said, it was a really great boost for me, a really great help for me to keep me, whatever. But like, I just keep thinking about, what about people who don't have essential jobs? What about people who are college students, like you said before? What about people who are, just trying to make ends meeting? Yeah, they might have one dependent or whatever case, but they still have to pay rent, they have to pay this, they have to pay that, they have to pay this. All these bills still due. So especially when the fuck they gave out the $600 one. Not only are you not giving us, not only, Daquon, were they not giving you the full amount that they gave us the first time, but they gave half. Baby, I don't know who the fuck rent is $600.
Not mine.
I don't know whose rent, because my rent's not that. And I'm a single person. So imagine, and if you get, and let's say, like, let's look at it like this. If you are a single mother with one dependent, you get an extra $600 with your $600. So that's altogether $1,200. If your rent for that 2-bedroom apartment is 8 something, that's pretty much the whole stimulus. And you got maybe $400 left to spend on what? Lights,
water,
electricity,
gas,
car payments, gas,
groceries.
So it just frustrated me that like there was, I don't know how the food stamp situation worked, but I feel like there was definitely there was some definite dropping the ball. And I feel like if you were not going to give consistent checks throughout the year, or even if it wasn't 1,200, even if it was like 600 a month or something like that, or just something to help stimulate the economy, I feel like my thing is, once again, I am grateful for it for me, because like I said before, I'm in a better position than maybe somebody else. But like I said before, what if I wasn't, is all I keep thinking to myself, like, what if I wasn't in that position? And this was like the only income I was getting right now. You know what I mean? It's just one of those things to think about. And I think that it could have been, like we said before, it could have been handled better with freezing of certain payments and having people understand that, okay, we're giving you this right here and this for this, whatever. Instead of it being a last resort and having to be fighting for so long just to approve the one fucking check. It's like, y'all, and then it was half, like Daquon.
Yeah, or if you compare it to, like, I remember, I don't know how often this was, like, I don't know the full scope of, foreign economies and stuff like that, but like I remember reading somewhere, like, in Canada's stimulus kind of bill thing that they passed, it was like $2,000 a month for at least 4 months. It could have been months for the entire pandemic, I don't know, but like having a consistent $2,000 a month, like America could never.
I mean, and they said that even if they equal Canadian dollars to American dollars, it's still like 1,400 or 1,200 after whatever. So it's still that amount of money coming in almost every month. And like I said before, I'm not complaining for me. I'm complaining for people who are not in a position where they have an essential job, where they have a job they can go to get the bonus, a job that's giving them whatever. Like, I'm complaining about those people, because like I said before, in some situations, some people have gotten fortunate enough, but in other situations, people have not. Mm-hmm. And it's my thing was like, it took them a while before they actually approved people who are waitresses and stuff like that to be able to get unemployment.
And those are the voices that need to be heard the most, because like at the end of the day, the people who are voting whether we get a stimulus check or not are not the ones that need a stimulus check
at all. That's the thing. It's like, why are y'all? How do y'all get to make a decision based on your life? Because Miss Mary Jo Bob, you have your trust fund, and you got your check coming in from the representatives or whatever. So you good. Your family ain't hurting as bad as other families are out here. Your stocks might be going down, but your pockets ain't really hurting. And I'm like, my thing is, Daquon, how is one single family, let's say both parents lost their jobs during the pandemic, and it took them I think one of my friends went on unemployment because she was a waitress or whatever, and she did not get her unemployment until I think it was 3 or so months in. And it was either 3, I think it was either 3 or 2, but it was a good bit of time before they actually approved her to get it. And I'm like, that's a lot of time for someone who doesn't have any. Thankfully, she had her parents. She was living with her parents or whatever. But my thing is, what if she was on her own?
Exactly.
Rent still due. Lights still due. Car payments still due. Gas is still due. Food is still due. So is she not able to bring in no kind of money? And once again, nobody's hiring anybody. So it's not like she could just get another job. So it's just frustrating me that I'm like, our government has not only, like I said, we are getting another stimulus check, and it is coming now. But like I said before, it's just the fact that rent was not frozen, the fact that car payments were not frozen, the fact that some things were not given more leniency is a little frustrating. So I think we've reached the end of our conversation this time. Daquon, are you good too? You got anything else you want to add about the coronavirus?
Listen, I am over this Panasonic, but we got to do what we got to do.
Listen, I'm over this Pentecostal Baptist church. So We have got a special, we did that this week because we wanted to make this more centered around coronavirus, because this is our episode, and just showcasing Black success in the field regarding this global pterodactyl. So many little boys and girls grow up never really knowing the full scope of what their culture has contributed to society and history. And it's time for that to change. So let's take a pause and look and remind the world just how we did that. So in an article, a woman's contributions to the coronavirus vaccine may prove key in overcoming skepticism, written by Callie Crossley. She discusses that Dr. Kizamika Corbett, I believe is how I said it, I believe how she says it, role in the vaccine development, how it has been more important than ever as public health officials like her NIH colleague, Dr. Anthony Fauci, try to allay fears and dismiss conspiracies among so-called vaccine reticent, those Americans who are not sure whether they want to trust the COVID vaccines to be safe and effective. Now, many and more than half, or nearly half of Americans who say they will not take the vaccine are people of color skeptical of this country's history of medical racism, medical institutionalized racism. Now, Dr. Kizamika's key contribution in designing the vaccine can help persuade so many rightly skeptical people of color that this vaccine is safe. Now, Fauci was delighted in underscoring the importance of Corbett's work, stating, "The vaccine that you're going to be taking was developed by an African-American woman, and that is a fact." And this is a definite, powerful antidote to the legacy of the Tuskegee experiment. That's what Callie Crossley writes, and it's really interesting to see that once again, an African-American woman was the one to help, was one of the key voices and one of the key scientists to help develop this vaccine. I mean, that's gangster as the fuck. Like, we popping off. We did that. Period. Go ahead, Daquon.
All right, so for my We Did That, I'm highlighting Dr. Shariki K. Kumanaka, who is the founder and chair of the Council on Black Health, CBH, formerly known as the African American Collaborative on Obesity Research Network, a national network of academic scholars and community research partners based in approximately 20 states around the nation. Dr. Kumanaka and the CBH have been working on collecting and distributing resources for the African American community during this coronavirus pandemic, as well as combating myths that are often aimed at preventing our community from getting the health they need. She is a member of the National Academy of Medicine, formerly the Institute of Medicine, and a past president of the American Public Health Association, and is involved in numerous public health related advisory and policy activities in the United States and abroad. Dr. Kumanaka has authored or co-authored more than 300 scientific articles, report commentaries, and book chapters. And then just to have Dr. Kumanaka's voice, she was quoted in an article saying that this would be an unparalleled opportunity for federal, state, and local governments to show leadership, to implement permanent solutions to ensure that health and well-being of all residents, giving particularly priority to those disproportionately experiencing pervasive cumulative forms of social and economic disadvantage and health risk. So just had to highlight that because they're doing the work of making sure that there are resources available and information so that people know, the truth about the coronavirus, but also being an advocate for our community, being an advocate for those who face different social and economic issues and are disproportionately affected by things like this pandemic. And, making a call to action that this is the time where we need to be making permanent changes to help these communities.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It's lovely to hear. I love to see it. Black women prospering. I love to see it. I love to see it. So like I said, when we're getting through this coronavirus pediatrician. We're getting through this. And one day we will come out of the other side. So As always, thank you all so much for joining us this week. We really appreciate you returning to see your favorites. As always, please do not forget to keep the conversation going down in the comment box below. We do respond. We do want to hear your take on this conversation. How do you feel about the Black community's response? Do you feel it's justified, because of the history of racism? So let's keep that conversation going. Don't forget that the Melanin Margin is also available wherever podcasts are available, sis. Do not forget to rate and review our podcast on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts or wherever your platforms are, if you're able to rate. We really, really appreciate that as well. Do not forget to follow us on all social media. For me, it's at Quaviondre and at Andre Talks a Lot. And for Daquon, it's at Daquon950. And baby, we will see you all next week for a brand new episode of the Melanin Margin. Bye.